Welcome to the Native Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Pione, and with me I have...
Amber Cantu.
Thank you so much for being here, Amber. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Of course. And I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. Thank you to SMI Real Estate and Compass Visuals for making this possible. I appreciate you guys. And Amber, thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah. We're sitting out here on the beautiful shores. We're in Seattle right now, aren't we?
Mukilteo.
Mukilteo. How do you say that?
Mukilteo.
Mukilteo. We're out here in Mukilteo, right on the ocean.
Yeah.
Amber, what is the significance of this location?
The significance is this is where the Elliott Point Treaty was signed by my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Chief Seattle, and many of the tribes in our area, Tulalip being one of them, yeah. Chief Seattle being the chief of the Suquamish and Duwamish tribe.
Yeah, that is such crazy history. Just really quickly for people watching, I want to touch on the purpose of the podcast, what our goal is, and then why that crazy story matters and why we want to talk about it. So the whole purpose of this podcast, right? You know, I have a vision of us being able to unite our tribes and bring us together. I believe, you know, if we're able to heal within our own tribes and bring our people together, imagine if the world sees that. Right. Imagine the impact that we can have on the world. And not just that, but there's a lot of like smaller reasons to do it as well. Like in our generation, you know, so many kids are watching TikTok and Instagram, but they're not on the res with elders, which that's how our history gets passed down. Yes. And the other reason is because there's a lot of Native American stories and history that's told wrong to people. And so when we're talking about Native American issues, why is it important to know about why Native American women are going missing? Why is it important to know about boarding schools? Like, how does it play into the culture? And so I want to be able to educate people on our issues. And then the third part is, it's by us, for us to share our stories with each other. Yeah. You know, just because like, I'm so excited to hear about your family's history and your story. And I think other people will be too. And so, and the reason why we're sitting here, right, is because you can kind of feel our ancestors, you know, our ancestral like spirits, like watching us and just the mood of like looking out on the ocean is so much better than being inside a podcast room, you know?
Right. Yes. You know, really, if you look at our people in the Salish Sea and the significance of it, our DNA is literally being carried in the earth and in the waterways. And that's the frequency of our DNA, of our people, of our ancestors, of our history. You know, what you're describing are storytellers. We need to tell the stories, the origins of where we came from, how we're still here, and why our voice matters today.
Yes.
And our future generations need to know how hard our forefathers fought for us to be here, yes. To be in this moment in time, and how we're raising up a generation of new storytellers, and we have to be innovative and creative in reaching their demographic right now so that they can carry with them our DNA, our stories, and the legacy of what's been laid out for us.
Yeah, for sure. And what's really interesting about that, right, is you see so many people be like, oh, well, you know, we just gotta get everyone, you know, back to getting off the TikToks and the reels and all this stuff. But the reality is we also have to face reality. And the reality is that's not happening. It's just not going to happen. And while I think we're going to develop a healthier relationship with technology, it's not going to go away.
Right.
And we just need to accept that. But then instead we think about how can we use the technology, like, you know, podcast setups and, you know, our ability to do digital marketing. How can we use that in a way to tell our story?
Yeah.
And how can we, you know, like you and I were talking about just briefly before, how can we step up in our communities to help lead and help be a part of the change instead of just being upset about what's happened? So on that note, I really want to delve into the history first. Yes. And then why don't we start with you said great. How many greats were in there?
I'm sixth generation.
Sixth generation. Okay, well, let's start with the origin story of your ancestor who maybe do a brief, like 1 to 2 minute about your tribe, the general tribe, and then lead up to your great grandfather. And then up to you.
All right. Well, I'm enrolled with the Colville Confederation of Tribes, which is a tribe in eastern Washington. And that is called the 12 Tribes. A lot of people say, well, you're there in eastern Washington. How is it that you're related to Chief Seattle? And quick history lesson, in our language, there is no TH. So it's not self, like a lot of people think. A lot of people will say self because in many writings it's SEALTH, but actually the correct pronunciation is Seattle. And in our Salish and Wasuchi languages, there is no such thing as a TH in our language. The appropriate pronunciation is Seattle. So I wanted to just a little brief, history lesson there. And then also talk about the significance of where we're sitting. And the Point Treaty is that I'm here today because my grandfather had the foresight, the knowledge, and the understanding that we were in a new world and our worlds were changing dramatically. And if he had not signed the treaty, I would not be here. My entire lineage would have been wiped out by genocide.
Yeah.
So this is the reality of why I'm sitting here today, and I don't take lightly what he did for me and for our people and our lineage. It was very challenging that point in time because people think, oh, well, they traded land for money. No, what they did was they signed the right for me to live.
Yeah.
No matter
honestly,
what, we would have been annihilated if we did not sign that treaty. And many of us, even after the treaties were signed, there was still genocide taking place in various ways that we'll probably get a little bit more into later.
Yeah.
But,
well, and here's one of the things that's super unique about, Native Americans. And this is why, I've had, and I'm open to being wrong on this. I've had serious issues with the word indigenous being used for us because, technically everyone's indigenous to somewhere because the word just means native people to a land, right? But, we're specifically native, like we're Native American, whatever term. We call ourselves typically native. But the reason why our story is different than many others is because we're still here and our tribes are still here and we still have our sovereignty. And that's, while it's sad that a lot of other places don't, the fact that we do is unique to us. And it's also our ancestors sacrificed so much to allow us to have that sovereignty and to allow us to still have our culture and to allow us to even have the remnants of our language still for us to be able to revitalize them. None of that would happen without the sacrifice that they made. And so I think just using the word indigenous, just like every other human in the world, kind of downplays our uniqueness and who we are, our identity. You know what I mean? Yes. And I think that, like you were saying, them signing the treaty wasn't them just, cashing in. It was them allowing us to be here today.
Right. So essentially they were put in, concentration camps. That they were allowed to hunt and to fish and berry pick. But the reality of it is that they were promised these things, but many of the lands that we were put in the Indian Act removal was, they put us in the most desolate, hard places. Yet our ancestors found a way to survive. They found a way to continuously, find sources of food and nourish the next generation so that we can be here. And I think that sometimes we don't think back on how hard it is because we live in a free world today. But they didn't. They literally were dying as they were trying to find a new way to live in the hardships that they were given. And being told, you can't cross this boundary line, and if you do, we're going to take you out. And then basically, that's where it will end. And so we have to look at the realities of what our forefathers faced, and we have to pull that forward today. When I look back on what they faced, I think to myself, I'm fighting for my next generation, and what am I, willing to sacrifice and give up? How am I dying to myself today so that my future generations can live like my forefathers? They literally laid their very lives down for us to be here. And what sacrifices am I making today so that our generations and our seed our DNA, our legacy
Yes.
will know. And how do we pull that forward so that they can not only learn, they can glean, and then they can take and herald to their next generations the sacrifices. And again, I go back to, what are we doing? Like today, your podcast, you're saying, I'm willing to do the hard things that need to be done. I'm willing to talk about the hard things that need to be talked about so that our legacy and our stories and our people will live on. This is part of it. You are a storyteller, so you're telling the stories of our people here on the Salish Sea and beyond. You're saying our people's stories are going to live on, and I'm willing to do the hard things. I'm willing to go into the hard places and talk about those hard things. Yeah.
Well, and what a lot of people don't recognize is that we talk so much about, it depends on who you talk to, right? But like when I talk to a lot of people who, do know a lot about Native culture, they only know the good stuff, the stuff that, the happy things, which we were very peaceful people for the most part, right? There was also a lot of conflict. Like a lot of the tribes had beef against each other, still do to this day. I was literally just talking to a man from Warm Springs, which my tribe in Warm Springs have had issues with each other forever. And what's crazy is me and him, we get along great. Me and other guys get along great. It's just for some reason, the tribes themselves will have beef against each other. And that's something that I think that we have the opportunity today to break down those walls, break down those barriers, and really help heal that. And that's what I think for me, if I can play a part in us being able to do that, that would be so huge. And because imagine, you and me being able to call, working on some federal legislation or something to help with our people, but we got to call this other tribe and collaborate together, instead of compete, with each other to help us all rise.
Laying our lives down and sacrificing.
Yes.
That's a sacrificial giving. For the cost of my future generations and what you're talking about, we're carrying the DNA within us. And if we have not reconciled a lot of the hardships from the former tribal on tribal atrocities before Europeans came in, we had tribal animosities, and we were at war. We were, with different tribes. And my friend and producer, she's one of my very good friends, Larissa, who you also have been introduced to.
Oh, I love Larissa. She is the sweetest person. And not just that, but her heart is, like, I love when you talk to people, like when you and I met, right? And we connected instantly. And I love meeting people who just genuinely care about other humans and are so passionate about what they're doing. And like talking to her and hearing her talk about her work in child welfare or being able to tell stories about Native, she's the most beautiful person.
Thank you.
And I think you are as well. And that's why I love talking with you about these things.
She's also 6th generation direct descendant of a chief, Yatsitotsi of Alaska. And so our forefathers were at war. Literally, there was bad blood. However, we have done reconciliation ceremonies to cleanse our bloodlines so that the DNA is not at war anymore, but coming together in a spirit of unity and love so that we can form an alliance one with another to create a place of peace across the lands. She travels back and forth from Alaska often. And so what she's carrying is that spirit of forgiveness, love, and she's laying her life down for the stories of her people as well and doing the hard things, MMA. And, I'm sure she talked about the television series. I'm actually an actress in that as a mom of 3 children. One of my children is missing. And that's where, missing, murdered Indigenous women come in. And, so we're highlighting the hard things that are happening today. This isn't something that happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Yeah, it happened then, but it's continuously happening today. And that's where we're highlighting the hard stuff that we're still facing as a society, as a people, as nations today, and bringing awareness to the big screen. Again, we're talking about technology. Yes. Technology plays a big part because, like you said, we have to embrace the places where our children are. And if if they're going to be watching a television series, why not be a television series that's going to teach them about our culture and about what we're facing as a people and why?
Yes. Well, and one of the things, well, just real quick, can we talk a little bit more, a little bit, not like all the way? Yeah, okay. One of the things that I really love, there's so many things to talk about just in what you just said.
Yeah.
I really love kind of where we're going right now with a lot of native culture, because like I loved, for example, watching Yellowstone. One of the reasons I really loved that show is because Native Americans played a huge role, but they weren't a victim. They were equally a player. Some of them were bad, some of them were good. It just like everybody else. And I loved that, because being able to see us in a position of, we have our own agency, we have our own power. Some of us are good, some of us act bad. And instead of us just always being the good guy or the victim, like there are sometimes people do bad things, you know what I mean? And so seeing the ethics of either side was actually really powerful to see on TV. And not just that, but like between, now we're starting to see Native American actors. Yeah. Which as a kid, you know, there may have been some, but like I didn't know about him. The only one I knew about was The Rock, and he wasn't even Native. He was Islander. so he wasn't even an actor yet until I got a little bit older. And so I think we're in a really cool spot where we're just now starting to, you know, accept technology and then also like being able to, you know, go into these roles and tell our stories better. And I think that's really cool. I don't know what generation I am out of the first, second. How do you even measure that? What do those generations start?
I'm a generation. My mom's a generation. My great-grandmother's a generation. My great-great-grandmother, you know, and so on, great-great-grandfather, you know. So that's really how I measured, you know, how many greats Chief Seattle is to me. But it goes far beyond that.
Oh, so you're saying you're 7 generations down from Chief Seattle?
6.
From Chief Seattle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's, and my children are 7th generation, and so...
Oh, so you're talking about from Chief Seattle down?
Yep.
Not from like...
From the beginning.
What's the beginning mean?
The beginning is how far we can trace our ancestry back beyond that, and which is centuries. Yeah. Our people, obviously, who've been here for centuries. And I would say the importance of knowing our legacy and our lineage is so that our stories don't dissipate. They remain strong in who we are. Yes. And, you know, we look at the strengths of our forefathers. And every one of my forefathers, you know, my great-grandmother was an amazing woman who was a storyteller, and she was a peacemaker. And I remember sitting under her stories growing up, and I didn't realize the significance until she was gone. Yeah. And I was like, wow, she was literally imparting our DNA, our history, who we are into me, and strengthening me. She was girding me up in a way that I didn't have any understanding of at the time. But now as a mature adult and as I'm aging, I'm realizing the importance more and more of how significant our stories are and how healing they are. They carry healing.
For sure.
In us talking about this, we're bringing healing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And I think that, like, I agree on the same note of, like, hearing the stories. For me, right, it wasn't until, you know, I was in public office, really. I was already, because I got elected in office when I was, like, 21 years old onto the school board where I live. And I was the second, I was the youngest ever in the state. There was one kid in, like, a small town somewhere, but, you know, those are, you know, I was in the second largest city in the country, in the state, and I got elected into the school board, and which was pretty wild. But it was in that role, and I didn't run as a native. I ran as Jesse, and I ran as, you know, I'm helping kids. But once I was in that role, I realized the importance of me being native and being in that role, and I got to learn that as I went. And then as I learned more and more about, you know, because, you know, I was just a kid and I was angry at the world at the time. And, but as I got older, I started to realize the importance of our stories, like you were talking about. And as I learned about the importance of me being there and what that meant to our people and to the kids who saw me in that role. Yeah. And then that's what got me to start to realize that maybe I should do more for our people and our tribe and do what I can, because Yeah, I mean, it's scary to me once you feel the gravity of how important it is for us to carry on our stories and our legacy. You know?
Right.
Because imagine if we don't, and then our kids kind of lose it,
Yep.
and then their kids lose it, and then we're like one generation away at all times from.
Yeah.
Because the federal government would love to get rid of the tribes as soon as they can. You
Yeah.
know, and so like if we lose our own culture, why do we have our own sovereignty? You know.
Yep. And I think I also believe, our people are the only people that have quantum.
Blood quantum?
So you can go into any other country and they don't say, well, what's the quantum, so that we know that you are really, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that actually grieves my heart, because we shouldn't be measured by quantum.
I agree.
I think that we should, our ancestors and our stories live on in our blood. The government has, I think there's been an overreach in all governments when it comes to quantum. I don't believe that quantum should exist.
Yeah.
And reason being is because it literally is a slow but sure genocide of our people.
For sure.
Of our DNA.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, and this from our history, we were talking a little bit, we went to a canoe journey on the Tulalip Landing on Sunday. And
I need to go to that next year.
Asked me about, well, what's the significance today? Historically, what can we pull from from this journey today, from our past? How can we pull that forward? And one of the things is that actually canoes were of course trading, creating alliances, creating unity and coming together, but also that's how many of our forefathers found and foremothers found their mates. Because if they married within their own tribe, they're marrying their cousin, brother, sister. And so, because some of the tribes, they were so intricate and, now everybody is somehow related somehow that they had to travel outside of that. But also...
So you're saying I need to get a canoe?
Yes,
Man, I've been doing it wrong.
Going on a canoe journey.
I've been doing it wrong.
Yes. But that is one of the ways, so, and one of the things that, my storytellers would tell us is that sometimes if, one of our family members got married off, let's just say to someone in Alaska, we might not, we will maybe see them again in 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, or maybe never again.
Yeah.
But when we do, it will be at a canoe journey. And so it was so important for our people to come together, to meet with our people, our ancestors, our loved ones, our brothers and our sisters, our aunts and our uncles. And, because we're family.
Yeah.
And the Salish Sea, this connects all of us. This is our DNA.
Yeah.
This is our legacy.
And it is so beautiful.
It is. And when I come out to the sea, I think about the importance of how it carries our story. It carries our blood. It carries, our people all across, really all globally at times. We've had New Zealand come in on canoes, and so we understand the importance, right? How crazy is that? But we understand the importance of how the sea has connected us as a people, and how our relatives are out there. And how many of our relatives haven't come home because of blood quantum, or because, they're not even recognized as us, as family anymore. Yeah. It's been so degraded by, the government or the powers that be that say, you're not really, well, then where do they belong? If not with us, then where do they belong? They do belong to us. They are our family. The
blood quantum thing is a very interesting conversation, because that's been rattling our tribe for quite a while. That's one thing that, like, when you really think about it, it's I 100% agree with you, because the question is, are we a people, or is it just like a race, or are we also a people? And I would say that we're both, right? I mean, I would say that, like, yes, we are like Native American by blood, but then there's also, it's technically its own country. You know what I mean? And so, like, yes, it's within the United States, and I also love America, but at the same time, I also have deep love and appreciation for our tribes as well. And so the two are, like, intertwined. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's also a country, and it has its own sovereignty. And so it's crazy that the sovereignty of a country depends on the amount of blood you have in relative to that race. Like there's no other place like that. Like imagine if Ireland would kick you out if you mated with enough people of a different race. That's kind of a crazy thought. Like if you apply that same logic to any other place in the world, it's a wild, people would say that's crazy. But for some reason, when it comes to Native American, it's normal for them to ask us how much we are, what blood percentage we are, and then, have us have a little ID card that identifies us and tells people like, here's the percentage of Native that I am, instead of like you just being Native,
Yeah, it's true. When I look at how that is hurting our children and these next generations, it is hurting them. It's telling them you're not enough of something.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, on my father's side, my dad's dad is Spokane and his mother is Blackfoot and Sioux.
Yeah.
And so, so then that you look at the blood quantum then, for myself and how my mom and my dad then had me. And then, my mom's enrolled Colville, but you trace our generations. Well, the federal government has kept tabs on, our family in detail because of,
You're part Colville?
Yes.
I believe we're also part Colville. Yeah. My family is. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because I think we're Colville, and I got to double check with my dad again, but I'm pretty sure we're Colville, something. And I think it was Calapooya. And he also said Nez Perce, but I haven't seen the receipts on that one yet. So
again, our storytellers know what we are.
Yeah.
And the government would love nothing more than to remove the truth of who we are and what our DNA carries.
Well, and that's the purpose of doing it, right? Because back in the day, right, if we go back before a bunch of people came here and told us to keep track of this stuff, we weren't asking each other, are you part of this tribe or that tribe? What percentage of what tribe are you?
It was, who are you?
Yes.
And you would tell, my parents are, my grandparents are, my great-grandparents, and then they would know you.
Yes, exactly.
By your lineage.
And if you're part blood of another tribe and part of this tribe, we don't discredit. We didn't used to discredit the other tribe. You would just pick a tribe and you are that tribe. You're 100% that tribe.
Yep.
We were never like, well, you're 25% Klamath, so and that part doesn't count. So that means you're 75% this tribe. No, like once back in the day, if you would marry someone of another tribe, you would go to that tribe, you're accepted, you're 100% that tribe now, and that's who you are. That's what you are. We weren't sitting over here dividing up pie slices of your percentages. And I think that is, it's crazy. And I actually think that really divides us.
It does. It's very divisive. You're right.
But what do you think is the solution? What do we do?
I think that is something that, I think that this would be, the tribal leaders recognizing and realizing, that this is, in fact, a genocide. It is a slow but sure genocide of our people. Mm-hmm. And understanding. I respect and honor Tulalip because they don't go by blood quantum.
Yeah.
They go by, who is
lineage
raised on the reservation in only 1 year.
That's interesting.
As long as you are raised, if you live on the reservation there for 1 year prior to your child being born, and you are Tulalip, then that child will then, in fact, be. Now, however, because we did have,
that's kind of a wild idea.
We think about Ikwa.
Yeah.
And how that affected many people and took them away from their tribes and their people. Well, there's actually, it's amazing how they made laws to protect those children. And so when they come home, beautiful welcoming ceremony home that I went to a powwow last year where kids that were removed and in foster care and lost touch, these are adults now coming home. Beautiful welcoming home ceremony, honoring and blessing and praying over our relatives coming home back into the fold. And some of these people, for the first time in 60 years, they were being welcomed home into our family back home. And that was actually held in Seattle and hosted in Seattle. And it was one of the most, I think, monumental moments of my life. I was in foster care as well growing up for a short period of time.
I was too.
I am a mother of 12 children, and I have made 9 of those 12 children my forevers through foster to forever.
That is the best story. Yeah. I love that.
And so I know, but I've made the conscious effort to stay connected every family, every child to stay connected with their people, because I want them, we're a family.
Yeah.
And so I make every effort to stay connected with mom and dad, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, because that's who they are. We are one. We are all family. And I want to make sure that, they feel that and they know that. And I'm honoring who each and every one of my children are in the process.
Yeah. Having been, kind of chewed up and spit out by the foster system, I know how hard that can be, especially like being Native, especially, being I look white as hell, if we're being honest. And so I know that, a lot of the other Natives that I was in foster care with and that I've met, you never really feel like you have a home because I'd say so much for you. Like a lot of times, like you're too white to fit in with a lot of like the Native crowd, especially when you're kids, because you're kids and you're not mature enough to, don't blame them, they're kids.
Right.
But, you're too white looking for any, people to consider you Native, but then you're too Native in culture and like the way you talk and like, and it's just in your blood, you know what I mean? And you're too Native to be white. And so it's kind of like you're in like and like you're not around your family itself. And so you always feel like like a stray dog and so it's really beautiful that you took a lot of those kids in. What has that been like? Because those kids are carrying a lot of trauma, and a lot of hurt with them. How have you helped them heal?
It looks like sleepless nights, but it also looks like no matter what, being steadfast to love them through the pain and the hurt and the heartache, the disappointments. Love really does cover. And that is one of the things in my DNA. I know that I was born to be a mother. I know that. Matter of fact, the wrap that I'm wearing today is Life Giver. And the reason that I believe is because that God had created me to bring healing. I believe the significance. It wasn't a mistake that I am a woman. It's no mistake that I would be used as a mother to nurture and nourish the sons and daughters that are placed in my care and let them know that no matter what, I'm here for the long haul. No matter how ugly it gets, no matter how hard it gets, I'm here, I'm your protector, and I'm willing to lay my life down for your healing. And what it really looked like, to be completely honest, is it looked like me going to a lot of classes. I had to learn what generational trauma was. I had to learn about systematic and systemic trauma. I had to learn about what it meant to be on the spectrum. I had to learn how to communicate with children with developmental disabilities and delays. And I had to learn how to holistically heal them from the inside out. And also I had to learn to give myself grace. There was a lot of grace there because there was a lot of, I call it failing forward. I'll never forget, I remember going into counseling with my then, he was 4.5 years old.
Yeah.
And I said, man, every time I make dinner, he always asks me to eat a snack. And I always say, no, because we're going to eat dinner. And then he literally he'll go into an episode like PTSD. And then we have to calm him down. And I said, I don't understand. And I'll never forget the counselor handing me this book that's called The Connected Child. And that's really where a lot of my own healing journey started, because I realized that I needed to learn a different language.
Yeah.
I needed to learn a language that somebody that has been starved, for days at a time, all he hears is, no, you can't eat. Instead of me doing a simple act of, yes, you can have that snack. Go put it next to your plate. And after dinner, you can eat that snack too. Because then he hears, not only do you get that, but you get more. So that's
a crazy thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn that every one of my kiddos that have been starved and malnourished, I had to learn to always keep granola bars or, snacks and juices in their backpacks for them so that they always knew they would never run out of food. And always have food accessible to them, like snack drawers and, in my fridge and in my pantry and stuff, because they needed to understand and know that they'll never run out. And, but it was learning a new language. It was learning to communicate in a new way. And so I was willing to do the hard things. I was willing to face my own traumas in the process.
Yeah.
Because it was hurtful in it. And a lot of things that I was learning was why I had a disposition in my own life. And
What do you mean by that?
Why I myself hoarded things, why I myself did what I did because of the of living in poverty and living off of commodity foods. And if you didn't eat now, you won't eat later.
Yeah.
And so it's just some of the things that I was over excessive in because I didn't have access growing up. And so I had these, it was a predisposition in a lot of ways of, overeating or overbuying, overspending because always afraid there's not going to be enough, rather than realizing that as an adult, I do have a say-so, and I have an understanding of how to break that trauma now out of them by making sure that they know that there is enough and making it a part of their DNA. I had to reroute their brain cells as I was being rerouted myself. So we were healing and learning together.
Yeah.
And so that part of why God knew that I was going to be a mother to the nations that were broken was because he knew that I was broken and I needed healing. And he knew that I would lay my life down sacrificially so that I could be healed, so that I then could impart healing to the sons and daughters he was going to bring to me.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Like even as you're saying that, like I can imagine, because you're giving me like a 2-second snippet into a daily life, because healing from trauma isn't pretty.
No, it's not.
And I know because I'm still healing, and so I can just I can't even imagine, especially with how many kids?
12.
With 12 kids,
5 adult children,
and at the same time,
7 young children.
Healing from your own.
Yeah.
And there comes that point, I think, when you probably realized, did the thought ever cross your mind, damn, I wish, like when I was a kid, someone did this for me?
Absolutely. One of my driving forces was my youngest sister had been in and out of our boarding school on our reservation. And she came to my home. I was only 22.
Yeah.
I was very young. And she was coming for the summer for a visit. And in that moment of her saying, "This is what's happening, will you keep me?" I was so young. I was a new mother, but I knew in that moment that this was one of those, I just knew that in order to be what I need to be to her, I needed to face my own pain. And that was the fork in the road for me. How am I any better than my foremothers were before me?
Yeah.
If I don't myself find healing. And that was my journey. That was the beginning of my journey to learn what healing from the inside out and facing the darkness of my childhood so that I would be a safe place for her and a safe place for my children.
Yeah, and that's a really hard thing to do, especially because a lot of the people oftentimes, and I don't know, I would like to hear if this is the case with you, a lot of times the people who end up, who caused a lot of the trauma to you were people who either loved you or were supposed to love you.
Yeah.
Especially when you were a kid.
100%.
And are they still in your life at all?
Some of them, yes. And what I've had to do is create boundaries. And there was a lot of perpetual abuse, verbal, mental, emotional, even spiritual, that I had to recognize and realize. And I had to put boundaries up. And I had to realize that if I want to protect my own mental well-being and my physical well-being, then I needed to create boundaries. And it was one of the, I'm going to be completely honest, hardest things I've ever had to do because I wanted their love. I wanted their acceptance. And, I was willing to go to the ends of the earth to be accepted by the ones that were supposed to protect me, but yet did not. In fact, that's where a lot of the abuse came from. And so it was very challenging for me. And then also realizing that the systems that were put in place to protect me also were failing me and failing my siblings and other family members, and it's a system that it's not really set up for winning. And so my husband and I had to make that conscious choice as adults that we're going to bridge those divides and gaps. We're not going to be the enemy of a mother and father that have just lost their child, their own mistakes, and then that child comes to live with us, and we are that safety, lighthouse in the midst of a storm for them. But we also had to
lighthouse.
Yes, we also though had to realize that we had to be a lighthouse for the mother and father, because most of the time they burned every bridge there is to burn, and they don't have anyone advocating for them. And if we really believe in reunification, then we have to believe in holistic healing for the family unit. And I believe that our design by nature is from the beginning to end redeeming the family unit. As a people, we are family. Everything that we've discussed so far is about family. It is about going beyond a tribal name, but into the very DNA and who we are as a people, as a nation, as Turtle Island. We are Turtle Island. And so I have to look at them as my relative and say, what can I do to help heal you so that you can be the best version of yourself for your sons and your daughters? And what does that look like? And I'll tell you, it has been challenging. It has been so challenging to help advocate for the family unit. But we've literally had to, as a mom, I'm a protector, but also I have mothered this child for years. And now I'm watching this baby that I've raised that's called me mommy go back and be reunified with their mommy, which is what we're designed to do. But yet a part of me is being ripped out of me, because that baby that I loved and nourished and mothered now is not with me 24/7 any longer. And I have to trust that God, our creator, he will protect this beautiful baby on their journey as they're, being raised now by the one that they came out of, that they were called and created to be. This is their mother, the womb that they were birthed up out of. And I came to carry that baby in my heart for a season, and I'll continuously carry them in my heart. But now they're back to the very womb and heart that they were created to be with. And so it's been very sacrificial for me in the fact that I've had to grieve the loss of every child that I've helped bring unification to, either a parent or a family member. Because whether they're in my care for weeks or months or years, they're mine. And I carry them with me now. And they're a part of who I am. And so that's been one of the hardest things of being in my position, but also recognizing that we did things differently, so we get to stay in connection with all of the sons and the daughters through their parents and through their family members, because they know that we're trusted people, that we weren't there to keep and this isn't for our gain.
You weren't there to take.
We were there to give our lives sacrificially so that they could become who they already are. It's deep within who they are. It's deep within who we are as a people. We're created to be mothers and fathers, protectors of our people, of our land, of our water, our earth, and family, and our family unit. And like you said, how can we bridge that gap? By families coming together, by these journeys. Canoe journeys connect us. It connects our people. We have ceremonies where we share our songs and our dance and our stories and our waterways one with another, so that we can continue our traditions, continue our stories, continue our healing journeys together.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack it in what you just said. And I think one of the the biggest takeaways that I heard, right, was that we try so much, especially like in today's culture, right? I'm like, we're taught, you just got to wake up and you got to want it and you got to do it and you got to, go forward and just, break out your machete, chop through the woods and make it happen. It's like, but one of the biggest lessons I've learned as I've gotten older is you can't control things. There's almost nothing you can control, to be honest, except for, what's right in front of me right now. Right. And how can I treat you? Yeah. How can I interact with you? How can I interact with nature? How can I interact with the world around me? And that's the only thing we can control. And so like what you were saying is just loving them for who they are, and loving them, truly loving them, is to not have the desire to control where they go and what they do, because it's like you said, it's in them, it's built in you. Who you are and what you do. And that's the even harder part about healing. You can't force someone to want to heal, right? All you can do is try to heal yourself, and you can give them the opportunity, but It's up to them whether or not they take it. And I think so often we try to control.
It's true.
We try to, control because we don't want to let go of the kid who we helped raise, who we love to death. And we know that they also love us, but it's also learning to love and appreciate the moment is a hard thing to do.
Yeah. And to realize and recognize that we're a part of the journey.
Yeah.
I'm a part of every one of my sons and daughters, my adult children that have moved out and moved on and married and, moved away. And it's challenging because, it's a part of who we are. But their journey and where they're going, one of the things with my son, my 24-year-old, he'll be 25 next month, and he said, Mom, you have to let me go. He moved out when he was 22, and he was the youngest out of the womb, so it was so hard for me. But I remember he was like, you have to let me live my life outside of being in your home. And I remember saying, you're right, and I walked away and I wept because he was so right. And my job in this part of his journey is to be his number one cheerleader. And that includes when he moves on, into his own life, into the newness of what he was created to be. And he travels all over the U.S. In his job and his trade. And
what does he do?
He's a millwright worker.
That's
so he
awesome.
Builds machinery.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so he just goes all over.
Does he like it?
He loves his job, and he travels a lot. He learns a lot.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to let him go to be who he was created and designed to be. And also learn balance and how to cheer him on where he's at in this particular point of his life. And that's with each and every one of us in every relationship. How are we cheering on? How are we helping, the people around us win?
Yes.
And how are we
That's
holding
huge.
them back? Are we holding them back with our emotions and our words and trying to manipulate and control and keep them safe? Or are we going to let go and allow them to live the divine design that they were supposed to in this journey, in this part of their life? And, do I want to be a part of their journey that is healing and hopeful, and they can come back and ask questions, and I can continuously mentor them through their life? Or is it going to be a place where, don't get back under that control and don't get back under that, and what we think is safe, oftentimes is control. And
totally.
And that's where, I don't find safety in the government.
Oh, no.
And anything that they have to offer me. And the reason why is because I know what they told our ancestors would keep us safe and did not.
Well, they still do that to today.
This day, yes.
And that's what's crazy is people think that was so long ago. But
it's not.
Yeah. So, for example, just one tidbit that a lot of people don't understand is for example, even my tribe, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Yeah. We got reinstated as a tribe in 1982 under Ronald Reagan. My dad was alive. So, which means of even my tribe, I'm the first generation of my own tribe, which one could even argue we were still getting screwed because we ended up, with broken families. And so my dad was a kid. And so if you think about I'm the first generation of my one tribe today, in 2025.
Yeah.
The first generation of my tribe not being directly screwed by the federal government. And I bet you there's tribes with even newer stuff.
Yeah.
I was talking to Larissa about up in Alaska, how they're still trying to just get their land.
And be recognized even.
Yeah.
We can look at the Duwamish people and how right now a part of them are still trying to be recognized. And however, Muckleshoot is 90% Duwamish, and Tulalip has Duwamish, and there's a lot of local tribes that Duwamish people are and going strong. The thing that what you're saying though is that the government and how they've hurt our people and how they're still controlling and hurting, you look at the systemic and systematic poverty, for instance.
Yeah.
It's both and you look at how it's, impacting, how it impacted me, how it impacted my next generations, and how I had to fight through, a lot of the things that I did, moving off the reservation and choosing to raise my family off of the reservation. I remember being called apple at one point. You're red on the outside but white on the inside, and I remember crying. And one of the most amazing pieces of advice that I was given, and which then I went back and shared with some of my family that were saying these things, is that Who told you that you had to be on a reservation to be with our people and to be who we are?
See, I 100% agree, because all of this was our land. In fact, if anything, we're on our original freaking land.
Yes.
So, like, I would say, you know, I'd give them the argument of, you know, if I moved to the East Coast, sure, that'd be me joining another tribe, basically. I'm in another tribe's land. But you're still in your people's original land. And even if you left, there's nothing wrong with going to another tribe as long as, like, that's your family, you know? But because we would still love our people when they went to other tribes.
Yes.
You know, if for example, you know, the familial unit was a lot more tight back then, right? But, like, for example, you know, back in the day, right, if you had, like, a daughter who, you know, sailed off in a canoe to a tribe over there, you would still deeply love her.
Yes.
And you would love her husband, and you would love their family, even though they're another tribe. And so even if you went to the East Coast, right, the whole idea of us calling, like, using the word apple or saying white on the outside just because you don't live on a reservation, if anything, being on the reservation purely because it's the reservation, that's the problem, if we're being honest, because that's where we were forced to be. Now, being with your people is super important. Being in your culture is super important. Like, I'm not trying to diminish that. That's not what I'm saying
Maintaining
at
connection is paramount.
Yes,
it is who we are, and that's how we connect.
Totally.
And it's how we,
Well, in most of us, like, there is a huge concentration of us in our culture on the reservation. So it's super important to be involved, to show up, to be there, to show up to events, 100%. But you're on our land still, and that's what's crazy. And I tried to explain this to a couple of, I went to Willamette University, which is a great school. The undergrads, the weird thing about college, Amber, especially like in today's world, is like you'll get told by liberal white people who live in the hills and grew up with like wealthy families, they'll teach you how you could be a better Native American, which I think is the wildest take I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And one of the things I tried explaining in one of our classes, so there's like every now and then, like I would just share perspectives, and I would try to, if I'd let people think what they're going to think, because I'm not changing your mind. But when people ask about land, how we view land, the best description I had is water, is by using water. Because I was like, imagine if we went out into this water right here and we put up a bunch of buoys in a square, and then I go in the buoys and then I say, actually, you guys can't come here anymore. This is my water. You'd think I'm crazy. Like, that literally just sounds stupid to anybody in any culture. They're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, that's how we thought of land. They're like, you can't just own the earth, you know, like that, like it was just, everybody all lived here. I'm, again, open to always being wrong. Like, while I am pro private property rights, at the same time, that's also counter to our original culture, which was,
to steward.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, I think that the whole idea of us not owning the earth, right, plays into the idea of you don't have to live on the reservation to still be Native, as long as you're still living within our culture and pursuing it. You know what I mean?
And that's what I said. Who told you that you were Native American just because you were on a reservation? You know, I went and purchased my land back. Where I chose to make my home, I went and purchased it back. And so, you know, the reality of it is that that's where I that was one of the wisest things that was told me, is that, you know, you went and you took back what rightfully belonged to our people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we're continuously doing. We're going and taking back, you know, what, and we're taking back our rights. We're taking back our culture. We're taking back our language. And that's why we have to band together, because if we don't continuously fight and advocate, you know, people don't realize that it was just in 1923 that Native Americans were actually considered a human being.
That's crazy.
You know, and then in the 1950s was the very first Native American that wasn't killed going to the polls to vote. It was in the 1920s that we actually were deemed human beings by the federal government. Before
That's crazy.
Then,
what year was it?
1923. And we were actually, before that, we were in the same category as cattle.
As cattle?
As cattle.
That's
were not allowed
crazy.
to vote. We were not allowed. Yes. Now, there were treaties in the 1800s, yes, but we still were not deemed a human being until the 1920s. And then it was, and then the first one of our people, a Native American, to vote was in the 1950s, that wasn't killed on his way to the ballot box. So it was even the sacrifice that the sacrifices that our people made to even be, taken out of the category as cattle.
Yeah.
That slave mentality still. And then placed, into a position of now you're humans.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, of course, back then, well, you can vote, but not really, because you were being killed on the way to try and vote. Mm-hmm. And so our votes really, our first vote wasn't until the 1950s, where we weren't, when our forefathers actually made it to a ballot box without being killed.
Crazy. And so, that's not even a forefather. That's like a grandfather.
Exactly. And so if we can recognize and realize, we're not that far removed from government overreach. I'm just going to use, for example, the first thing that I thought about when COVID came out and they were trying to enforce, what they wanted to on the people. I thought of the blankets that we were given. And I asked myself, can the people that are saying they want to protect us be honest this time, or should I learn from my history books? Should I learn from my oral history tellers?
Yes.
And should I remember that it wasn't that long ago that we were actually deemed as cattle, and and not only that, but you were taking our sons and our daughters from us and placing us in boarding schools and placing them in these civilized homes to civilize our children, saying that we didn't know how to be mothers and fathers, that we didn't know how to parent our own children, and that the government take over and do that. And so I started really thinking, and I just had to really question whether or not I could trust the motive of the federal government even in this. And that is really why you asked me before.
Now that we're looking back, right? Enough time has passed that now we can look back and be like, they were lying to us about almost all of it. Yes. And that is what is crazy. Because even I, for a minute, because when it first happened, right? I was trying my best. I was like, you know what? We don't know what this thing is. I'm down. Let's be careful. Time goes on. And then they try to give us a vaccine. And then they didn't tell us that vaccine was only I would think it was 85. I don't want to say the exact, people are going to get all up in arms if I get the wrong percentage.
Right.
But it was super effective for a time period. I think it was 6 months. I'm just going to say a year to be generous. But they didn't tell us it was only effective for this period. And then they wanted us to get the booster, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. These pharma companies wanted us to get us on a subscription so that way they could keep bankrolling their bank accounts. And it was crazy to me that the government hid and lied so much information about this instead of just being honest about it. And that's what I think was crazy, because so many people were trying to give the government trusting in them. And then it just...
And one of the, things that our ancestors, they carried our medicine with them for a reason. And what are things in our medicine? It's the earth and everything that it yields. It holds healing properties for us.
Yep.
Upper respiratory issues and certain things, people that were asthmatic, that's why they look to the jack pine needle. There's just different things that we look to for healing. Why did our people never have blood clots? Well, because we have salmonberry. We holistically as a people, have lived for centuries off of the land, and our immune systems were built in a way to respond, to the healing properties of everything that this earth has to yield and offer to us. And our ancestors knew that, and they know that. And so when we go back to our ancient medicine, when we go back to the medicine that our ancestors lived off of, and they did for so many years and lived well into their hundreds, then, I'm going to look to that, because I know that is something that I can stand on. It's something that I know to be true. And I know that my ancestors, in our ways, in our holy, holistic, sanctified ways, it was to heal us and to bring us into a position of strength, holistically, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so I look back on, what our ancestors came to offer us and how they imparted that into us, and how there were lots of years. If there wasn't a storyteller that was preserved, our stories died. But we've had this goes back to, our language and what did they do in the boarding schools? They beat our mothers and our grandmothers and our fathers and our grandfathers into submission and to not use their language. And so when they were adults and the language was being spoken, they would weep because of the trauma that they've experienced by even speaking their own language. And, you know, this is what's in our DNA, but yet here we are finding that our ancient medicine is bringing healing and that our ceremony is bringing healing back to our people and to our family.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think there's also one thing that I found, especially like being involved in politics at a young age, was that everyone was trying to cram red or blue on me, right? A lot of people were like, well, the government's just here to help you. There's all these programs. And I'm like, yeah, they've said that before, or like people try to put you in a box. Well, why do you, well, Jesse, why do you believe in, protecting our land and protecting our country? I'm like, well, we were warriors. We protect our land and protect our people.
Right.
Like, well, why do you not trust government? I was like, well, pretty obvious reasons. And so what's really funny is like with our culture, and if you knew our history, it's really hard. You can't put us in a box.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, at least that I've learned as I was in office, and then I learned as I grew older and learned more and more and more and more and more about our history, was it distanced me from both of the parties, really, because I was like, neither of you represent us very well. And that's one thing that, I've really, as you learn more about the history, as you learn, more about why do we act the way we act, and why do we want to govern ourselves?
Right.
I have found that super fascinating as I've gotten older.
And I've had many conversations with our native family, our relatives, and I've said, they asked me the same thing. Well, why didn't you vote for this way or that way or whatever? And I said, you know what? I'm not for a political party.
Yes.
But I am for a people.
Yes.
And I am going to advocate for our people. I'm going to advocate for the people that are in my home that that I am called to cover and protect. Yep. And that's really where the rubber meets the road for me, is that I'm not, my allegiance isn't to a party but to the people. Yes. And that's where my allegiance is going to lay. I am going to fight, and I am going to move every mountain there is to be moved so that I can have, freedom, healing, and reconciliation for my community, for my city, for my state, for our nation. It infuriates me when people want to put you with a political party rather than, representing a people.
Yes.
Human beings. And
totally.
As a Native American, we realize and recognize, that we can't be put in a box. We can't be put in a party. We can't be put in a color. We are actually, we are the United States of America.
Exactly.
We are the first of the first.
Yeah.
And we have to go back to the first. And there's wisdom. Why did we live for so many centuries before the European settlers came?
Well, what's crazy is a lot of the traditional American values, right?
Yeah.
A lot of those stem in our values and the things that like we held dear, like, being able, like freedom of speech, being able to speak, being, when they talk about like the right to bear arms, we used to protect ourselves and our tribes. You know what I mean? Like or like when you go into, you should be like, well, there's some tribes who didn't follow the, some of them were skinning people, but those were different times. But my point is, a lot of the main core values that America believes in were a lot of the same values that we would live in and believe in,
right?
On a just in our lives. And what's even crazier, I saw this stat, and I don't know if you know this. I don't know if this is entirely true. I haven't dug into this, but I saw this thing where it was talking about how there was more Native Americans here before people showed up than there is today.
Yes, it's true.
Isn't that crazy?
Yep. No, it's absolutely true. And, the reality of it is we had an amazing civilization that was happening well before any settlers came in. Yeah. Was there war? Yes. Was there divisions? Yes.
For sure.
But we also knew how to govern.
Yeah.
We were a governing people. And so that kind of wraps me into, you asked me, why are you running? I'm running for City Council of Marysville.
And as we're talking about, representing our people, a lot of times in Native American culture, there's a little bit of, depending on what tribe you're in, there can be a little bit of resentment in you getting involved in the general community as opposed to the native community. But at the same time, I'm a strong believer of this is the world we live in. We live in these communities. Why would we not represent our own people and step up to the plate to lead? Because otherwise our voices don't get heard. And so on that note, we were just talking a little bit before, and you said that you're running for city council. Is that correct?
Yes.
What led to this?
Well, I believe that it's a way that I can serve my community. It's a way that I can serve my city. And, our people are a people that have governed for centuries. And there's so much wisdom, understanding, and knowledge in how we governed. And we have always been a people, at the end of the day, we would have truces one with another. We would have powwows and reconciliation, tribal on tribal. And I look to the past and I pull what I can from my past into my future. And we see that, my great-grandfather was a man of peace, but he knew how to war for what really mattered to the people. And that's where I think we're crossing this isn't political, this is personable. This is not about politics, it's about people. And I am a constituent of the city of Marysville. I've been there for 25 years, and I have seen divides, and then I've seen some unifications in ways that, okay, great, let's expound, let's monopolize on what works, but then also learn what doesn't work and what's not working. And why not be a voice for my city and my community and pull the wisdom from our past and bring it forward so that we can start enacting, governmentally who we're called to be in the land, stewarding. We're called to steward and to be people of governance. That's been our call, to protect and preserve the waterways and the earthways and the people that are in it. And if we're not doing that, then we're not owning fully who we are created to be as a people in the nations. We're nations, we're the first people of the land, and we should be involved in our local city, and we should be involved in every branch of government, because this is our land. When I look at, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. When I go through Seattle and I walk through Pikes Place Market, this is my grandfather's vision that I get to freely walk through. He was an innovative person who's seen all of the world coming to one place for trades, and this was his dream, and I get to walk in it. And there are times where I'll walk through and I'll just weep as I see all of the nations in one block radius, just walking through there and weeping, because we are Seattle. This is Seattle. We are the people of the land. And so when we step into those places of governing, we're stepping into our DNA, our right, and rightfully so, because we're a people that have learned what doesn't work, and we have that wisdom, but also we have the holistic knowledge of what true reconciliation looks like, and bridging those divides and gaps bridging those divides of races and nationalities and all of that. Because, one of the things that my grandfather believed in was covenant relationship, and that's why there was marriages, with different tribes and then the first European settlers, because it was saying that not only do we believe so much in community, but we're willing to covenant so that this community can live in peace and prosperity one with another. And so when I think about getting into a position of serving and leadership, it's really to serve. It's not because I want to enact my own beliefs on anyone. It's because I want to come in and serve my fellow citizens of my city in a way that it's a bipartisan, so it's not about politics, but it's about people.
It is about people.
And I postured and positioned my heart in a way to, how can I serve you? What are your concerns? And then how can we as a community come in and reconcile these concerns?
Well, and I think, one, I love your approach and your thoughtfulness behind your decision to run, and then also your approach and your thought about how you want to do it. And my one feedback to you on that is, if you treat this like how you've treated raising 12 kids and loving these kids that aren't yours, loving them no matter where they chose to be. And even when you raise this kid as if it's yours, and then you give them, hand them off back to their parents, and you still love them through that. If you treat this position in your community the same way that you treated those kids and love them with that same unconditional kind of love, I think you're going to do a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. What are some of the things that, because I don't live here, right? But I assume most cities kind of deal with the same things for the most part.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the things that you think that are the top issues? What do you plan on doing about them? What are the actionable steps? Because I'm a big believer of, yes, there's so many people who can talk. But then when it comes to doing things, they don't do jack. So what's your game plan here?
My game plan, first and foremost, I'm a student before I'm anything. I recognize and realize that we have a tremendous housing crisis. Mm-hmm. We have more people moving in than we do homes. Our schools are already overcrowded. And there's just so many things to look at in the demographics of the different people that we're serving. And, the reality of it is that we need to work together, like with the Housing Commission, and, we need to work together, the different boards and people that are already there and existing. But what I can see is what we've been doing does not work. It just doesn't, because we landed where we are because we've been, continuously doing the same thing without getting a different result.
Yes,
and so we
I
need
100%
to
agree on
implement.
that.
But what I really believe is that we really do need to sit down and have some of those hard discussions, with the people, and yes, I do believe we need affordable housing.
Yes.
But also, we need to make sure that we're maintaining our ecological system, because that, for me, taking down all of the sanctuaries that we've had, for our animals, this is part of our ecological system. And once you remove all of that, I moved 25 years ago, and I had forest all around me, and it's healing.
Yeah.
It's healing to walk through and be able to pick berries and relax without the sound of the city. And that's not so anymore. I've lived within a mile radius of for the past 25 years of each of my homes, and I'll tell you that we have to travel now to find that silence, that solace outside of the sound of the city. And even then, right? Seeing the stars with the light pollution, right?
Or people just leaving garbage everywhere. Yeah. Just the lack of respect for nature.
Yeah.
And even then, it's hard to get away,
We have to be good stewards of what we've been given.
Yeah.
And, so how do we steward well as a city what we've been given? And how can we incorporate, affordable housing?
Yep.
But also maintaining a sanctuary, for the ecological system that exists.
Yeah.
And how can we stop turning wetlands into, housing communities? Because it was a wetland for a reason, and we need to maintain those sanctified places for our ecological system to really be prosperous and whole and healthy. And so I just, I advocate for balance, but also recognize and realizing we do have a real crisis that we need to address. And also taxation. People are tired of being taxed for every little thing.
Oh, so much.
How are we supposed to really live and afford to have a peaceable life when all of our paychecks are being taxed, so much so that, when you go to the grocery store, can you really even afford to buy that? Is that a luxury now? What used to be a necessity, now we're saying it's a luxury, and that shouldn't be either.
Yes. So
we have to find balance in all things so that we can live, we can prosper, and we can grow and be healthy as a community.
For sure.
We're a blue collar working family. My husband's a union worker. I'm in the caregivers union. So we understand the necessity of working and giving our all to our work, but also have to recognize and realize that there are people that are living below the poverty line, and how can we help raise that? How can we help raise them up out of that? Yeah. And give them the actual tools to help them be prosperous. For sure. But also, where are we failing as a community and as a people that's causing this crisis in the first place? What can we do on on our level as a grassroots level to,
Yeah.
you know, maintain what we have, but then make it better. And so we have to work one with another. And I think that, you know, we need to look at the private sector, and then we need to look at the public sectors, and look at the government run and the nonprofits. And we need to come together and say, what can we do together to make this better, rather than this nonprofit and this government and that governmental program. You know, if everybody were just come to the table and realize and recognize we're all trying to do the same thing, and we're not in competition one with another.
Yes.
If we really want to help the people, then we really have to start putting down our names and our political parties and help the people.
Yeah, we're just really seeing people as people and realizing that. I 100% agree with you on that. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is we look at government as a unit. We look at private sector as a unit, but really, if we think about it, what is the private sector? The private sector is people like you and me deciding, I want to start this laundromat, or I want to build houses. That sounds fun. Like, I want to develop. That sounds cool. Fun as hell. You know, like, so private sector is really just people building things. And government are sometimes the same people. You know, it's sometimes the same people who are put there to serve these people. So when people say the private sector as if it's like not human, it's the voting block. It's just, those are humans who are trying to just build things. They're trying to build things and feed their families and feed other people's families, right? And then the government is literally there to serve them and to serve the workers and to serve everybody within that private sector unit. And so I think that sometimes we forget that. One of the things that we really suffer from in Oregon that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on around housing is permit costs, how much it costs to get permits, and the amount of regulation that we have on building housing. Now, you and I, right, I love the environment. I think our national park system is one of the coolest things that our country has done because it's preserved natural beauty. You know, whereas like when I went to, in the places that I've been in Europe, not trash talking, I don't want Europe coming after me on this, but it's just super built out, you know, like they don't have what we have when it comes to like just, you see a view and you're like, damn. Like, it's just so large. We have so much national park space, right? And I think that's beautiful. And I think we definitely need to preserve a lot of that. And I love, you know, in our culture, we love animals, we love nature. At the same time, how do we balance that with also people need a roof over their head? And there's some things that we do in the name of like, environmental stuff that doesn't actually help the environment. And it's just like us adding costs and extra burden onto people for no reason. Like there's a lady kind of near where I live was telling me about how she spent $50,000 in a year and a half just to draw a pretend property line through her property that she already owns. So she already owns this property. She's just trying to divide it into 2 lots. It spent $50,000 in a year and a half just to draw a pretend line that's in our heads. And so like, or like the permit process, how much it costs for people to get permits. If you're wondering why housing is so expensive, the amount of permits and stuff that builders have to pay for a piece of paper to draw a line, if you're thinking that those costs don't get passed down to the people buying houses, you're crazy. You know what I mean? And so we're wondering why housing is so expensive. And we keep talking about building affordable housing. What about just regular freaking housing and making it less expensive? Because if we build more regular housing, then there's more available and then the prices will drop. You know what I mean? We also need to build affordable housing, especially, right? But looking at that as the only solution instead of looking at, well, how can we make it easier for regular people? Because think about it. Also, those huge costs, I can't afford to pay $50,000 to draw a line through my property. You know, so if you and I wanted to get into building houses, how do you start? You build one house. You build 2 houses. How are we ever going to afford to be able to go become a developer and to become, that's the whole American dream, is you're supposed to be able to come from nothing, work hard and build stuff. But now we're putting so many regulations and the costs are so high for people just to get in and we're wondering, why is there a huge difference between the haves and the have-nots? We're not making it possible for people to become the haves because of the amount of cost it is. So not to go on too much of a rant, but
what you're saying is it's true. And we have to look at that. We have to go in, and that's one of the things, we look at, how much does it cost? The rules and the regulations and how everything is so tight and it's harder and harder. And the reality of it is the rich are getting richer. They're developing properties, these housing developments that they're renting out. It's not the American dream. These aren't houses that are being put up for us to buy.
Yes.
They're to be rented out by the rich getting richer. And like you're saying, the American dream is that we can build our own and own our own home, our own property, our own vehicles. And if we can't afford to do that, then we really have to take a hard look at why cannot the everyday American, blue collar working American, why can we not afford to buy a home? Why are we perpetually renting when the dream is to own? We need to look at the regulations, and we need to look at the overreach of power.
Yeah.
Because that really, at the end of the day, this is, our local government needs to make sure that, first of all, they're being transparent with the constituents. And second of all, is this what we the people voted for? Yeah. And if not, then how are we going to reconcile that? Because to be completely honest, there's too much overreach going on in every sect of government. And at the end of the day, it's all about your character. It's about honor and transparency. Yeah. And if we are not a people of honor, and we are not a people of character, and we're not a people of transparency, then we're part of the problem. And I like to say, a lot of times I've failed forward. Yes. I've learned from my mistakes, and sometimes I've had to relearn from my mistakes. But at the end of the day, I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to listen, and I know what it's like to have to move in wisdom. It's not just me that we're affecting, but it's the entire ecological system, the ecosystem of our home, the ecosystem of family, the ecosystem of community, and state. And that's really like, how is this going to affect this? This is going to be a ripple effect. Every choice I make affects everyone around me. And so I need to use wisdom in my own choices, because I understand that this is going to affect everyone around me. And one of the greatest things that I think that we've been bringing back is potlatch. I just want to say that. Larissa and I, we held a potlatch. This is something that the Salish Sea has offered our people for centuries. And it is a gathering of family and community, and breaking bread and sharing songs and sharing stories and, bringing reconciliation. Yes. And so this is part of, I just want to say, like, part of us growing one with another is creating these spaces and places for us to come in and reconcile and heal as family and as brothers and sisters. And of the Salish Sea. And so that's something that I look forward to in the future, as we have and host more potlatches for you guys to come and be a part of that. And then maybe you'll eventually one day, you and your community will hold a potlatch, and we'll come and be a part of that as well. But this is one of the ways that we're reconciling tribal differences, and we're willing to learn from our past mistakes. We're willing to heal from it, but also we're honoring and celebrating one another's differences and our tribes and our traditions, and bringing them together to the table and saying, how can we learn from you? And we're going to nourish you with what we have, and we're going to allow you to nourish us with what you have. And because of that, we're greater. We're greater in the end.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is, I think that's well said. And I'm really thankful that the lens that you look at policy through is kind of seeing people as people, and making sure that at the end of the day, whether we're right or wrong, on each policy, making sure that are we treating people as people, and really taking it back to what you and I were saying about family, of treating community member, as a human, as a person, that they deserve to be loved, and doing the best we can to serve them. And so thank you for sharing your perspective on a couple of those things. I love that. I'm excited to be a part of that one day. That'll be a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much for Amber for coming on the podcast and for hanging out with me. I want to say a quick thank you to SMI Real Estate and Compass Visuals for sponsoring the podcast. And thank you guys for hanging out with us. Amber, it's been awesome.